All right. Well, Dr. Gwendolyn Dolske, thanks for being on the Sense and Signal podcast. We're going to start off today with a little game. Many philosophers over the years have been leadership coaches. They've mentored leaders in their civilizations and communities. So we want to present a couple pairings of philosophers and ask you who would be the better leadership coach. And I'm going to start off with the first one, and just give us a response. It can be short, and I'm interested to see what you have to say. So, the first pairing, who would be the better leadership coach? Plato or Machiavelli? Virtue and ethics versus throwing your best friend under the bus so you can get the corner office overlooking Park Avenue.
I'm going to go with Plato, but yeah, I don't know. No, it's so funny when you said you can be short. No philosopher knows how to do that. That's not.
That's fine. That's fine.
Our version of short is a 3,000 word essay.
There you go.
But I think I'll go with Plato. But I know that something that might surprise people about Plato is that he was not for democracy. He was not.
Yeah.
He watched his mentor, his teacher, Socrates, be executed by a majority vote. And after that, Plato's work was not for a democracy. But I think in terms of leadership, I still think that I like the virtue ethics, and I still think that he had something solid that would make for a good leader. So, and not exactly being for democracy, he made the claim like, if you'd want the captain of the ship to steer the ship, you don't want to have a vote on it. It makes sense to have the person who's the most qualified and is the most knowledgeable to be in charge. So when we think of something that's not a democracy, we think that it necessarily has to be Machiavellian or it has to be evil or something like that. But the idea is whoever is in charge is experienced and qualified and has a just disposition.
Right. And the authoritarianism and anti-democracy is going to, I think, come up again, maybe in the next one.
Are we ready for the next one?
Yeah, we are ready for the next one, Jodah.
Aristotle or Hobbes? Education and character development versus we need a Leviathan the size of Donald Trump's ego to prevent social chaos.
So I'm going to go with the ancient Greeks again. I'm going to go with Aristotle. I'm going to go with Aristotle. You can see where I'm leading. But Aristotle was actually the mentor to Alexander the Great. So,
is there any documentation of what Alexander the Great thought of Aristotle?
Oh, you know what? I don't know. That's a good question. I should look into that. That's a great question.
That would be interesting.
But the thing is that with Hobbes is that there's so many times where I see the way in which he's demonstrating reality or talking about, if there's so many resources and everybody's going to kind of pool together or we're just going to tear each other apart. So we have to put our trust into some other leadership. But there's this inherent idea that it's the Hunger Games, really, for Hobbes. Right. And so you have to have some sort of an authoritarian to take care of everyone. But I still lean toward the ancient Greeks, I think, and I think I have a bias. Whenever I read them, I think that there's a truth there about what it means to live life well. This just resonated with me.
Yeah, that's why they're the cradle of Western civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So the next pairing is Rousseau versus Derrida, the social contract from the will of the people versus unhinged obsession with words, power, and social constructs.
Oh my goodness. Both of them are needed. So I'll go with Rousseau, even though Rousseau is okay. Yeah, I'll go with Rousseau. Rousseau after Plato, then we didn't see democracy and then Rousseau brought it back. So I'll go back with Rousseau, and Derrida's picking at language and deconstruction is, I want to say, of value, but I don't know if that would work for a leader.
It could be true. I could see it paralyze you as a leader. You're thinking too much about every
So,
word.
so name a Derrida leader. Name one. Like, who would be? Who do you think would
Oh my
be
God. I don't
somebody
think
contemporary?
they're introverts. They're introverts. There's no Derrida leader. I don't think that
Inter-
exists. They're the ones that are not the leader and they're not the follower. They're their own path.
Nietzsche versus de, de Beauvoir.
I'm going to say Beauvoir for this reason because it seems counterintuitive for me to think of her, but she actually was a thought leader. So it makes sense. Nietzsche
Hmm.
also is extremely valuable, but I might even kind of put him in the camp with Derrida. That's like when you're a Nietzschean, you are your own person. You're not the leader and you're not the follower. You're your own person. Whereas Simone de Beauvoir had a way of just rallying people to think anew about the way in which we defined ourselves. And I really like that. But Nietzsche was a rejection of organization. So I don't think he would be the best leader. Everybody would leave the organization.
So our final pairing, we're getting up into the contemporary era. Um, of who would be a better leadership coach. So either of these two people could actually do it because they're still alive. David Chalmers versus Sam Harris. Awareness of consciousness to make ethical decisions versus we have no free will.
Oh my goodness.
Are you familiar with either of them?
I know Sam Harris, but I don't know the other thinker. But
David Chalmers is a consciousness philosopher, neuroscientist kind of guy, and really focused just on consciousness.
okay, so here's the thing. All right, so Sam Harris, actually, there's been some research that some of the ideas that he's hinging on, they might not be correct. But
Oh,
I
interesting.
know it came out in the Atlantic not too long ago that there was like this presupposition behind the notion of determinism, which is Sam Harris's position, that might actually be problematic. But I've lost it. I mean I can't think of it. This is such an interesting question too because I'll just talk a little bit about what I know about Sam Harris and debating over
Okay.
whether he could be a leadership coach because on the one hand, the idea that you don't have free will doesn't necessarily mean that you throw your hands up in the air and that's the end of it. If you think everybody behaves according to a causal factor, then if you are a leader and you want to have the best group, the best management, then you would know which causal factor to insert in order to make that happen. So Sam Harris might actually work for that. It might seem counterintuitive if you think everybody just acts, everything is cause and effect, but it doesn't mean, like in the same way with parenting, if you think of things in terms of determinism and cause and effect, then as a parent you are going to want to shape your child by introducing good causal factors for their behavior. So it's not
Right.
it's not the lack of responsibility or the lack of being human that people I think assume with determinism. So that's just what I'll say about
Yeah.
Sam Harris since I know him.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you,
Cool.
Gwendolyn. And so we are here with Dr. Gwendolyn Dolske on the Sense and Signal podcast. And Dr. Dolske has done a lot of writing on existentialism, teaches critical thinking, moral theory, ethics, and existentialism, the philosophy of sex and love. She's penned a small book on tips from the professor and co-produces and co-hosts Good is in the Details podcast, which is an excellent podcast that Jodah and I have been listening to, and we definitely recommend it. And we'll have a link to that podcast in our show notes. And so we're here to talk about the philosophy of leadership. So, Dr. Dolske, why should leaders be thinking about philosophy? What can philosophy contribute to someone's mindset as far as their leadership approach?
I think, and I'm going to appeal to Aristotle a bit here. Aristotle would write about what is the object of life. And he had this question of what is the aim? If you were going to say somebody is a good man, well, that presupposes that we know what the aim of man is. And I'm not being gender friendly intentional because he wasn't. But the aim of man, we have to know what the aim of man is if we're going to discern whether or not a man is good. And we want to be able to reverse engineer what makes a man good because then we can have good citizens and then we can put that in our government structure and our organizations if we know what makes a man good. So the object of life he had to ask this question of, we do everything for something. So like, you like I'll tell my students, I'm like, you sign up for this class, what is it for? Okay, so it's to get my GE requirements. So what is that for my degree? Okay, what is that for? So I can get a job. What do you want a job for? So all of these ends, there's this means or reason that we're doing it for something else. And then you get to the end. Okay, well, I want to make money. Well, I want a house. I want a family. Then I want to travel, or I want to go to a great concert, or these things. And you say, well, what is it all for? And Aristotle came to the conclusion that it was for happiness, or the Greek term was eudaimonia, which means excellence and flourishing. And when we have that aim in mind, then we know how to direct all of our goals. And that is what makes a man good. A good man is when he is acting toward excellence and towards flourishing. And this was such a powerful concept that it's even in our own American documents, this idea that you have the right to pursue it. So happiness isn't this subjective, emotional type thing, like what's happy for you, what's happy for me, but it is an activity of the mind, of the soul, for pursuing excellence. So I would say when it comes to leadership, as Aristotle told us, when you understand that that is the object of life, then you are going to make room and space for people to demonstrate their excellence and to encourage that. So you would never want to have a
Right.
legal structure that would curb it. Like if there was a law that came out tomorrow that said women can no longer get graduate degrees, that would be a violation of one's pursuit of happiness in this ancient Greek sense. If there's a
Hmm.
law barring, let's say, some sort of a drug, it's not quite the same thing. If you want to say, but that makes me happy, no, we can't. It's not the same thing. That is not what is meant by happiness. So, any leader in any structure that understands that the driving force of what makes somebody good, and if you want to have an organization of good people, you're going to want to foster that possibility for excellence.
I love that
Right.
idea.
And I
And
do
we've
too.
spoken to some people that have said, who have frameworks that they're kind of pushing. I think that kind of delve into that. But I'm gonna speak, let's say, from a leader perspective. Um, I have to make. I'm making a business, and this business needs to. I'm gonna be very cynical with this, right? Needs to make money. Well,
Mhm.
ultimately needs to make money, and there are proven multiple means for a company to make money. You can make money by creating better products, and people, and let the democracy of capital of capitalism work, right? Do they buy it or not? You can also make money by reducing overhead costs, firing people, making people work a little harder, making them drive in. Now, is that sustainable? No, probably not. I mean, I don't want to get into the details of that. But how do you again, Dan and I completely are probably on a board or agree with this concept that you want to actualize these people, the whole goal, and that it makes complete sense to me that if you have a team who is actualized, who feels like they're a leader in the space that they're provided, and they're able to um, manifest their skills optimally for us, for the outcomes that they're probably looking for, you'll have a better team.
Mhm.
But I don't think all leaders see that. I think leaders kind of see this end goal,
The,
this
the
and
bottom
and
line,
the
maybe
bottom line,
the
yeah, and that
so-called bottom line.
that's right, and be damned with the people. They would never say it in those words, and I think it's becoming less and less. So, to be fair to leadership today,
Well, I think the culture
um,
is changing too.
it's changing, yeah. But
Mhm.
what do you tell? How do you get leaders who are really focused on the bottom line? How does that translate into this notion that you just brought up?
I think from the practical sense is that it is actually in the business's interest to have that, because if you want the best talent, they're going to go where that's offered. They're going to go.
Hmm.
So if you want the people who graduated top of their class, they're the most innovative, the most creative, they're going to go to whatever company is offering them the space to be excellent and to be human. So what are your like let's say family leave hours, kind of like these things that seem to cost money are actually the things that will retain the very best talent and will let you get the pick of the best talent. Because if you do not have that space and somebody is talented at your place, they will leave. They'll go somewhere
Yeah.
else. So it is in the bottom line, it is in the financial interest to go ahead and have all the things if you want the best, because that's where they'll go.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a huge cost to turnover and losing institutional knowledge and losing expertise, and then the turmoil constant change makes. So creating an environment, where people can thrive and self-actualize, makes a whole lot of sense to me. Um, the other thing I want to talk about in terms of philosophy and leadership, your expertise is on existentialism, or what's one of your areas of expertise, and that's a very specific branch of philosophy. What does that have to teach us about leadership? And I guess I'm thinking of it in terms of values and ethics, because
Hmm.
one of my understanding of the existential position is that there is not a universal gauge or criteria for anything that's ethical or how we value things. It has to come internally. We create it ourselves. So how do leaders help people and the people that they're working with create value and meaning from an existential perspective?
It's a great question. And I think this is actually why I was drawn to the existentialist in the first place. And just my own backstory is that I went to Catholic
Hmm.
school my entire life. And even in my undergrad years, I was studying more analytic tradition. And then I moved to Belgium to get my graduate degree. I was at another Catholic
Oh, wow.
university, and it's the oldest Catholic university, KU Leuven. And I was there and I started reading the atheistic existential thinkers. And I dropped everything and said,
Sartre.
yes, Sartre, Camus, Simone de Beauvoir. And I said, I am not none of the other stuff. I need to know more about this. And one of my fascinations, I guess, maybe because of my background and also because they were in Catholic France when they were writing, in the 1930s,
Hmm.
40s, 50s, 60s. So I was absolutely fascinated and intrigued by the way that they could create a value system and a type of ethics with disregarding the very thing that you're talking about, removing God from the picture, removing any kind of universal truths. And the way in which they were able to craft it is that there was this idea, instead of being ethical or unethical, there was this notion of being authentic versus inauthentic. And
Mm.
something that the existentialists Sartre and Beauvoir agreed upon is that the human being is outside of definition. The human being is constantly in flux and is constantly in a state of becoming and flourishing. And the moment that you try to define the human being, you've treated the human being like an object. Like, let's say, like my phone is definable. I am not. I was somebody different 10 years ago. I was somebody different literally 5 minutes ago. I will be a different
Right.
person in the future. And that also has to do with the choices in which I create. So I am now a podcaster. That is because I made the decision to do podcasting. I wasn't that 4 years ago. So I'm constantly in flux.
Right.
I'm a mother. I wasn't that 3 years ago. It was a surprise. So now I am a mother. Um, all of these things were changing. So, in terms of understanding the human being, according to Sartre and Beauvoir, that the human being is really two parts. One is the facts of your existence, your physical self, the body into which you're born, your geography, your ethnicity,
Your
these types of
demographic
things.
details.
Yes, yes, and even like the fact that I am a woman, that I'm of Polish descent, that I'm 5'3". These things are the facts of my existence. Then there's the other part, which is called transcendence. And that is one's ability to transcend and have kind of the will to go through different situations and constantly become. The human being is this complex part of those two things. When you are living authentically, you are sitting in those two parts. Bad faith
Mm.
is when you have reduced yourself to one or the other. So bad faith would be if I said I can't study philosophy, I am just a woman. That would be bad faith. Or if I were to say I'm going to be in the WNBA, that would also be bad faith. That's pure transcendence. Like it's simply not possible. So we are two of
Right.
these things. And so when it comes to, let's say, back into leadership, back into the workplace, I think that what the existentialists call on us to do is that if there is no, let's say, I want to make it, if I'm speaking from their point of view, that I am not myself delivering an
Right.
atheistic point of view. This is their point of view. that if we do remove some sort of power like God, some sort of head honcho, some sort of director, as St. Thomas Aquinas would have referred to God, if we remove that, then that means everything is our responsibility. And that is really an
Right.
extraordinary thing. And Sartre wrote that we're afraid of that responsibility. And so we're more likely to live in bad faith because it's so much easier to say, oh, it's, I did this because I'm a woman, or, whatever God wants. And when we do that, we are not living authentically. We're not taking responsibility for ourselves. The most empowering thing is that everything you do, you are constantly redefining yourself. And that's amazing, and it's responsible, and it's also scary. It's also a frightening position to think that no one else is in charge, which means that the
And,
world
and,
that we
and
live
Sartre
in,
would also say it was heroic too, right? It was
yeah,
a heroic act to face that.
it is. And I agree with that. With even with the history of philosophy and the history of great thinkers and great leaders, contemplation and action is a courageous thing to do. It is courageous. And in terms of the practical leadership organization, taking responsibility is essential. And even let's just say with Jodah's previous example about giving people the space to engineer and design something that is creative, that's also very exciting when it comes to business. If you see that there is some sort of a gap or a need, and you have that ability to bring your creativity to light, to bring something into the world that wasn't there before. That's the other thing that Sartre says. If we remove God from the picture, then that means we are the creators. So even if you have an idea in your head, let's just think about it for a second, how amazing this is. You have an idea in your head, it's a thought bubble. It can be music, it can be an engineering design, it can be a poem, it can be a piece of art. It's in your thought bubble. The second you take pen to paper and you write it down, you have brought something into the world yourself that was not there before. And that is incredible when you really slow down that process, and putting that in mind when it comes to business and bringing something new into the world and being a good business, because people will appreciate that. And then people will want to be part of that, I think, as opposed to just being a cog in a machine. So I think that's how existentialism could help with our understanding of where do I fit in the world, and the world is my responsibility, and how do I start to make things to make it the place in which I want to live and my children
Gwen, I know you're not a coach, or maybe you are. I don't know. Maybe that's another job you have.
live.
But I'm going to be willfully dense here. Um, so I work at a company, and a company I like, let's say, and I've been hired to do a job that I'm functionally doing for the most part, but there also feels that there is things aren't happening either, right? And I'm starting to contemplate leaving, or I'm not sure what to do. And you don't have to lend your response to that framing, that scoping. I'm just kind of like, here's a person, right? We call them personas.
You're creating a
Um,
scenario.
yeah, or a person that we're speaking to. I get what you said, but can we distill it down a little bit to, again, I know you're not a life coach, but distill it down to brass tacks. What am I going to take with that information? This is my life. I'm doing my job. What does it mean to sort of embody the things on not to say anything you said wasn't practical, but like in my job's terms? How do I translate what you just said?
What do you think? There's bell hooks, the great bell
Hmm.
hooks. She wrote a book all about love, and there was a section in there on work and on love. And this I really liked. So I'm thinking about the position of the worker. And she said that, how you come to work and how you approach work, no matter the job. So you could be, now this is my words, like the barista at Starbucks, or you could be an executive. You're still in charge of the amount of effort and the way in which you approach people and your work. And it's part of your own self esteem. And so I would say the brass tacks is that when somebody, to take a moment to think about not only how is work fulfilling and defining you, but how are you defining this thing in order to be satisfied? Because if you're not happy or you're not feeling like you're doing something meaningful, then it would be time to find something that is meaningful. Like human beings cannot we cannot sustain that. Like one of the worst punishments you could give to somebody, for example, would be to have two buckets. One has sand in it, one is empty, and tell that person for 8 hours a day to empty one bucket into the other and into the other. It would drive somebody absolutely mad. So then we'd have to
Right.
decide, is that what our work life is? And look at like what Bell Hooks was talking about in terms of love and work and self-esteem. I just think about, let's say something I want to recognize is that when I go into, let's say, a Starbucks or anything like a restaurant, or if I'm going into a store, recognize that I am now part of somebody else's workday and I have the power to
Yeah.
make it good. And that person who's serving coffee, maybe the person is having a crap Monday morning, right? Maybe they just got into a fight. They don't feel like going to work. And that barista in that moment has this opportunity to be part and shape somebody's day. I think that
Yeah.
that's something that's quite beautiful. So in the practical way of like the workspace, a lot of it has to do with, we have to recognize that the labor and the work is still an expression of who we are and the kind of space that we can create.
Have you
Yeah.
heard of
And I would say
Simon
to,
Sinek? Have you heard of Simon Sinek
I
before?
don't know. I don't think so.
Okay, so he's a thought leader coach, and I would argue what you just said embodies what his theories are. Interesting character. Dan and I have spoken about him in previous podcasts, and that's kind of what he talks. And he has an analogy about the person who works at NASA, and he says these people who work at NASA and rocket engineers, stuff like that. But he says so does the what do you say, the janitor, Dan? He says the janitor can proudly say that he works at NASA because he is actively making it so the facilities are clean and
Mhm.
up and running so that these people can come, and he can take ownership in those areas, and he can identify new areas of ownership that are actively trying to improve the the sanitary conditions or the working conditions for those people so that they can do it. So he says this janitor can proudly say, I work at NASA, and that's all. And so it kind of
Yeah.
embodies what you just mentioned. And this is a coach.
Yeah.
This is yeah.
I would also, to play off of what you've shared, Gwendolyn, is that, yeah, I think maybe Sartre would say, hey, it's if you're not a good fit, if you're not thriving in that environment, it's actually your responsibility to go somewhere else, to quit and find another place, because you're not necessarily required to stay in a specific job just because out of obligation. You should bring you, again, back to the happiness and meaning to your life, which I guess brings me to another question. What
Wait.
is
I
the
want to respond.
relationship?
I need to respond to that, Dan, real quick. Sorry, man. Hold pause. So that's one thing I want to just we can move, discuss real quick, and that is that you did mention that heroicism, and I think it's I personally think it's unfair to expect everybody to be heroic, and I just challenge
Those
that
are Sartre's
concept.
words. That's Sartre's words. That's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
I'm
No,
just.
no. My point being is like, yes, I think I agree with that concept, but I also challenge that concept in the regard that not everybody has the opportunity, or maybe they do, maybe they
Well,
do, to move
he's
from
not
from
talking
one.
about quitting a job, though. He's talking about just self-actualizing in who you are,
Mhm.
even in a small, subtle way, right?
I
He's
don't
not
know.
talking about the workplace
Yeah,
necessarily. I mean, he's talking more abstract.
yeah. Well, but I am talking about the workplace. So I fundamentally still agree with that notion. Um, but again, if you're a dad or a mom who's working at three jobs
Yeah.
and you're just doing it just what you can to keep,
Oh yeah, no,
this notion of self actualization, then starts to feel a little.
You're right. It's
but you
elitist.
also,
It's
I
a little
mean,
bit elitist because not everybody is in that position. And I
Yeah,
think that one of the issues is to then find out, resolve that if there is not this freedom to move about, if you really are stuck in that, then that's also another issue that should be addressed on a broader scale, on a government scale, because the
yeah.
idea of somebody being trapped in a position, and that is the case for a lot of people where they don't have the wherewithal to be able to
mhm.
move, or they've got family, they've got, when you've got the bills coming up, it's not like you're there to contemplate your existence and wonder if you're a good fit. So I completely agree with you. And the fact that that is true tells me that societally there's something else that needs to go on. And that would even bring me back to Aristotle and the notion of, if you understand what is the object of life, you will be a good leader and you'll be great in politics. He said every great political structure understands this, and it is really the measurement of a good political leadership structure is if they know that the meaning of life is excellent, because that will filter through everything. So for somebody to be trapped in a job that is soul sucking, if you will, and not be able to go anywhere else, then that's also another issue to be addressed. And I don't think that, you know, we can just there has to be some responsibility that goes around everywhere. I think if the worker is just constantly hating their work and they're always blaming their boss or this or that, then they really need to evaluate, okay, wait, something is going on, and take that moment to evaluate. And if the leader or the owner of the business is just saying, oh, all these workers are just terrible, nobody wants to job, it's like, nope, I think you need to sit back and think about what kind of place are you offering for people to not be there. So
Right.
that's the blame game that I think is unhelpful and never gets to any kind of resolution.
Two strands that I see percolating through here are meaning making and happiness. And what's the relationship between how we make meaning of our lives and the degree of happiness we're able to achieve?
I think
Is there a relationship?
mhm. I think that's where Aristotle would not have focused on anything like meaning. But then that's where
Right.
you've got hundreds of years later, you've got the existentialists coming in, and they are the ones who are talking about meaning. Because when they get
Right.
rid of all of the rules, then the question is, well, what is meaningful then? And their answer, this would be with Sartre, Beauvoir, and Camus, I'll just lump them together. They have similar responses to this, is that nothing is meaningful unless you yourself find it meaningful. And you actually know what you
Hmm.
find meaningful by your choices. And that's also a difficult pill to swallow, because a lot of people want to go ahead and act and then not say that that's actually a reflection of what it is that they want or they care about. But that is not true. What you do is reflecting what you find meaningful and important at that moment. And so that's where meaning comes from. I give the example of to my students of when I was young, like in my early 20s. My friend and I, we did a little bit of traveling in London and Paris. And when we were in Paris, of course, we had to go to the Louvre, but we were like young and didn't really know anything. And we're just elbowing our way to find where the Mona Lisa is, right? That's all we were doing, elbowing our way through this like 4-story palace, several winged palace, just to find one thing. And why?
Imagine
Because
all the
And it's
artwork
so
that you're just
small,
yeah,
passing
and it's
by,
like this big.
because everybody says the Mona Lisa, right? So it is a
Yeah,
value that everybody says that is what you have to see. So that was directing all of our efforts. This
yeah.
is a giant place. We only have so much time. We're going to go see this because that's whatever. And then by the time you get to it, it is, it's a very small
Yeah,
work of
it's
art.
like
And
this
we've all
big.
seen it before. There's no surprises. And there's a ton of people also crowded in that room. And we kind of shrugged our shoulders and we're like, okay. And then we left. Now, I don't want to be down on the Mona Lisa,
I
but
had
I
the
will
same
say,
exact experience, by the way. I had the same exact. I was like, walked into that room, like there was like 100 people in there, and that small thing. I was like, oh well, I'm
yeah,
going somewhere else.
that's what it is that we were governing our lives, our trip, according to what everybody else said was valuable. But if you yourself do not find it of value, then it's not going to mean anything. Now, as I do value the Mona Lisa and think it's genius, so I don't want to put that way. But in that moment, it was not. It was far from our expectations, and so I think that this idea of meaning, I think the assumption that people have about the existentialists when they say that there are no rules that are written in stone or in space or anything, and that's the scary thing about existence, is that you're thrown into it. It doesn't mean that you just disregard everybody else. It means that you have the responsibility is yours, is to find life meaningful. And Camus wrote about this with the myth of Sisyphus. He says that
Right.
so for your listeners, if they're not familiar with the myth of Sisyphus, it's essentially an ancient Greek myth where you have Sisyphus is condemned for all eternity to push a large boulder up a hill, And then once it gets to the top, it's going to roll back down, and then he has to push it back up. It's kind of like what I did with the sand in the buckets.
Oh, you see my days. Okay, I didn't realize
I
that.
know. I was just having like a traumatic
Yeah.
experience right there, having a flashback.
Well, I think that's actually what Camus is talking about. It's like that's the habit of life. But Camus says one must imagine Sisyphus happy. That's how he ends the myth of Sisyphus. And I struggled with that because I didn't get it. And I
That's
realized
fascinating.
what he meant after ruminating on it for far too long. One of these aha moments is that it is because Sisyphus still has a decision of how he's going to interpret that moment. His mind is still his own. So even though he's been given this task, he can decide if he's going to sing a song in his head, write in his head, do complicated mathematical equations in his head. He can make of that situation whatever he wants. So even the punishment is this idea that you can impose meaning on somebody, make somebody feel like they are meaningless, but actually only the person can do that themselves. And so I think that that's what Camus' call for us in the habit of life is to kind of wake ourselves up from the habit of life and realize that we have this power to discern what is meaningful and what makes us happy.
You made me think about a
Right.
quote from Nelson Mandela. He said, "The greatest glory doesn't lie in never falling, but in rising every time you fall."
Mm-hmm.
So I found that interesting. Seems to align a little bit with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I think we fail at work, we fail in our pursuits, and that's okay. And getting up and brushing yourself off and enjoying the process of pushing that boulder up the hill and finding
And there is no feelings.
some
One of the
value and
things that
happiness in that.
Dan and I are always talking about is the notion that I think Buddhism says life is suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't say that necessarily in a way that's meant to be sad. It's kind of the condition to some degree that we're in, and it's that effort, it's that trying, and it took me. It's a late in life game. I wish I figured this stuff out a long time ago. Every time I fell, it was like I felt so down on myself, but it's the learning process of each time you've pushed that rock up, and you might know that that rock's always coming down, so you're not trying to win the game of having the rock stay at the top of the mountain. What you're trying to win at is maybe getting the rock up faster each time. You set these goals, you set these things, so I think like we were saying, it's this process, and learning to enjoy the ups and downs, I think, is quite critical in being a happy person as you move through this
Absolutely.
cosmos.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I've told my students that people who are successful have just failed more than you. And because it
Right.
really is
You're
this
right.
idea of it's a learning process. It's it depends on what you do with it. I recently tried something new. I'm not going to get into it, but I failed. I failed miserably. I tried something new. I did something. I kind of uprooted myself, tried something new, and it just did not work out at all. And so it's like I'm, middle aged and I'm still just like learning from trying new things. And if it doesn't work out, I actually learned a lot about, well, wait a minute, what does work? And if I can tweak this part and that part, and that upset and that thing not working out was actually probably one of the greatest things that has happened to me in a long time, because the recovery from it has
Yeah.
been glorious.
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
learned a new phrase today, post-traumatic growth.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we loved it too.
Yes, a previous guest just taught us that this morning. The idea that you have this bad thing that happens to you, but instead of collapsing underneath it, you kind of grow and learn from it. So post-traumatic growth.
Hmm.
I'm gonna try
Um,
what post traumatic PTG. Yeah.
I'm going to use that.
PTG. Yeah, no, it's a cool one. So I know you just did a conference and you presented on, youth and technology, and I imagine part of that is about meaning making too. And I think as leaders, we have to deal with we're in organizations that are multi-generational, and we have Gen Z coming in and millennials, and I think all three of us are Gen X. And then we have the boomers ahead of us, who are starting to leave the workforce. But we're dealing with all these generations, and they all seem to make meaning a little bit differently. So what are you seeing with Gen Z? 'Cause you're a college instructor, a faculty member, professor. What are you seeing with the upcoming generations and how they construct meaning, and especially through technology? Because I know that's another one of your areas of expertise.
Yeah, I think that something I'm learning from Gen Z is that they're very quick with technology. They're pros. I think they're very witty, and they're very socially aware. And I think that that is something that is different just because they've been raised with social media, which means that they have access constantly to people giving them information about what's going on around the world
Hmm.
and even within the United States. So they're actually a bit more political leaning than youth generally are in any generation. And I think that that's fascinating. One of the things that people kind of cringe about with Gen Z is that they don't have the same attention span, and that is true. Um, I don't want to be too hard on them because then I just feel like I sound old, like I'm just complaining about the generation, the next generation.
You sound like a
Um,
boomer. We don't want to
yeah,
sound like
I don't
boomers.
want
We're
to
all
sound like a
X's.
boomer. Oh my god. The
Well, and you have to admit we've been affected too. I mean, you ever sit back and watch some of those movies from the 70s, which I still love. The speed of those things just seems so slow after you've watched some contemporary movie, and
yeah.
it even affects us.
Yeah, I think something that I've also seen from Gen Z that their relationship to work is going to be, I mean, different from Gen Xers and even from
Oh yeah.
millennials, and it's a complete departure from the boomers. And I think there needs to be an understanding is that they're growing up in a radically different economic reality, and that there's also an independence of working for oneself, like what they've learned through social media. A lot of Gen Z has learned how to make money through things like social media, and they're very crafty at it. They're great at writing code, those kinds of things. So the idea of spending 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week for a company that might not even pay them enough to buy a home or get rent is not
Yep.
worth it to them. The idea of working just to survive does not sound good to them. So this is a complete
Hmm.
departure from the boomers, but in all fairness, the boomers, when they did work for a company, they got paid enough for housing. You don't have that same situation now with
Hmm.
Gen Z. So I think that older generations are looking at Gen Z and claiming that they don't want to work or that they're lazy. And that is not true. They are always busy doing something. And like I said, they're extraordinary, but the expression of their work looks very, very different. And they are not going to be interested in selling their soul. They're not going to be interested in spending all of their time for somebody else's company to be successful. So anybody who's in leadership is going to have to be very mindful, I think, of what Gen Z's the problem is. Why I would say the leadership needs to be mindful is because I think Gen Z has a point. If I didn't think Gen Z had a
Oh, they
point, then I
for sure
wouldn't
do.
then I wouldn't say that. So I'm not suggesting that leadership just like bend to whatever whim somebody has. They do have a point, and the respect for what they can offer and the respect for their time, they are going to demand it. And if you're in leadership, you will need that. Now, I know from my position as a professor, so it's a sort of leadership role, right? When I'm in the classroom, I'm supposed to be the
Yeah.
smartest one there. I tell my students my job is to make sure that you know more when you leave here than when you walked in. Hopefully I can pull that off, although I'm learning a lot from them. But I also have to be mindful of their needs. So because the attention span is different and because they are very quick and very savvy and social media conscious, it actually prompted me to see, hey, can I try some things here? What if I could teach philosophy in a TikTok? Can I do that? And
Oh, cool.
I tried it out. I started a TikTok account, and then I did things here and there. There was no traction whatsoever. And then I tried to do a couple of logic lessons, and that just took off. And I realized, oh wow, there's really a hunger here. Gen Z's onto something. You can do a bite-sized version of something that is bigger, and then people want to come back for more. And so I learned that philosophy can be very engaging and can be entertaining. And it doesn't have to be this, long winded 2 hour lecture, like out of, what Ferris Bueller had to sit through, right? Will the Ben Stein.
Bueller?
Yes.
Bueller?
Bueller. Bueller. Bueller.
Doesn't have to be that way. So I appreciate that they have given that to me. Now, and the other thing I will say about Gen Z is that they are the most ethnically diverse generation out of all the generations.
Mhm.
Now, philosophy is the whitest and most male dominated academic discipline. And the problem is that when you have a PhD in philosophy, like from 20 years ago, like what I have, all of your training is in white Western European male philosophers. So that means that even though I have a PhD, I have to put myself in the role of student again. And I have to make the effort to read thinkers of all over the globe, different backgrounds, people of color, and then learn that and figure out how to present that and offer that to my students who are the most ethnically diverse, so that I make sure as a leader, I am also meeting them. And it's also my responsibility that I'm providing material that is relatable and interesting for them to want to learn more. So I am also grateful for Gen Z for kind of shaking things up and forcing me to rethink, wait a minute, what does it mean to have a work of philosophy? The fact that it's the whitest and the malest, those are not characteristics of philosophy. They are not. That's not what makes
Right.
something philosophical. That is not part of the definition, and somehow it's become part of the definition. So, what are other thinkers that are outside of the philosophical tradition? Are they actually presenting works of philosophy, and can I bring that in? So, that is something that Gen Z has given me. Now, what I would say I want to give Gen Z, and I will, this is my line in the sand, is that the attention span thing, like you said, I get it too. I mean, I enjoy TikTok, I enjoy social media, I enjoy that stuff. But I know when I've been on it for too long, and I know when to turn it off. I'm also aware that if I have a break and I scroll on social media, that I don't feel replenished after that 10 minutes of scrolling. If I do a yoga pose or I read a short essay, then I feel replenished. And I can be mindful of the distinction of my body and of my thoughts. Gen Z doesn't have that same framework. They don't understand quite what that feeling of being replenished is, what to do with boredom, which is a very human thing. And that can be costly because we're seeing higher rates.
Wait, can I pause you real quick? Are you making the distinction that the Gen Z is alienated from the concept of boredom because in the world that they were raised in, essentially
Or what to do with
being this
boredom.
or what to do with it, so they can circumvent it all the time because of the technology they have, essentially, right?
Yeah.
In theory, but I think what you're saying, actually, they're still bored. They just don't realize it. But yeah,
Right.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. And that space for contemplation is necessary, or for boredom is necessary. And we're so afraid of it. So that's why we're constantly plugged in. And that is causing sleep deprivation. It's causing depression. It's causing self-image issues. It's causing a lack of interaction with people. So that part, I think, is worth our attention, and where I think, hey, philosophy can step in. There are some truths about being human, about being excellent, about being happy. There are some truths about that they don't waver. And we want to keep in mind, wait a minute, what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to have meaning? You need that space for contemplation. You need that space for rumination. You need that space for enjoying things that are uniquely human, like deep conversations with your friends or laughter with your friends. Laugh at a fart joke. I don't care. Laughter is important because that's what connects you with somebody, and it's uniquely human. You can't do that if you're always on the phone.
No, you know that we're going to probably
Right.
interject a fart
A
joke
fart joke?
after you
Okay.
said
Yeah,
that.
I know. Go for it.
More than likely,
Yeah.
Dan will edit it, and there'll be a fart joke somehow, somewhere in there. Yeah, most likely.
There was a fart joke in the very serious and beautiful drama, The Last King of Scotland, with the great Forrest Whitaker. And I remember seeing that film in a crowded
Great movie.
theater, and then they did the fart thing, and everyone was laughing. And then everyone died down from the laughter. It stopped, and I was still laughing, and it was very embarrassing. The person I was dating at the time. I was with my family, so everybody stopped laughing. It's like they're over it, and I'm still thinking, because the absurdity of it interjected in this very serious film with Forrest Whitaker, I couldn't stop laughing. So anyway, but that's also like, that requires time with each other, a vulnerability, like these. Yeah, the technology is supposed to be an assistant, but not a replacement for human interaction. And I think that we're missing that with Gen Z, and it's showing up in very problematic ways. Like I said, like rates of depression, for instance.
The notion of what you just said with the Gen Z, and I think other people, but I do feel like it's probably a trailing trend, but back down as the Gen Z. Do you think this might be introducing levels uh, um, of mental illness? This thing, because you mentioned lack of sleep and a lack of, those can't be good in your mind. And I think we have a rise of. We had a podcast recently where we talked about the rise of mental illness. I suggested that, yes, it could be causal for the world we're in, but maybe it's because we also are identifying things more based upon our measurements. So who knows? I don't know. But I'm asking you, do you think there's a corollary or a causal quality to the nature of the world we're in and how it's affecting the Gen Z culture?
I don't know. Um, my gut is that it is a causal factor, but that mental illness is so complex that I would be reluctant to be like, this is the causal factor. But
Yeah.
I think it is a causal factor. And I think one would have to do a study where somebody's treating somebody with a mental illness and see what happens when you remove that, to see what kind of the level of impact that has on people. But it's difficult. One time I challenged my students. I said, I want to see if you can do this for 1 week. Don't look at your phone first thing in the morning. Do something else, even if it is just to go brush your teeth, just do something else. And I said, the reason why is because when you look at social media or emails first thing in the morning, you are starting your day by responding to somebody. You're either looking at what somebody else is doing or
Hmm.
looking at what somebody thinks of you. So instead of the first thought of your day is on what you want to get out of your day, how your day, what is your goal? And your goal can be rest, by the way. Like whatever your goal is, how you want your day to go, your mood, your tone is all that's coming second to what other people are asking of you or what you think of other people. And so I asked my students, can you do it for just 1 week? Only 2 students lasted for 3 days. And so this desire, it's taking us away from our own thoughts. And I think that that's a really big problem. And as far as like mental illness, I think that there's degrees, there's spectrums, and we're learning more and more. But at the same time, Gen Z has also been born into, well, they just had the pandemic, they had COVID, they've had a different economic
That's
reality. I know every generation has had their thing. um
Yeah.
but sometimes I also think, but are we more anxious anyway? Because there's always, with technology, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. I'm a big fan of modern dentistry and modern and plumbing. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm bad
we
on
all still have our
technology.
teeth instead of dentures.
But
I'm missing a couple, but yeah,
but
right.
the thing is that there is always everyone is always on call now. We're always on call because you always
Yeah. Yeah.
can do something.
Yeah.
And that is creating, I think, everybody at a level of anxiety, because somebody can always text, send an email. There's always something that can be done in any space. And so that is, I think, difficult on everybody. And that is also causing anxiety. And Americans
Yeah.
in general, Americans out of every other, like, of our countries that we have the most in common with, we not only have the fewest amount of vacation days, but we take the fewest amount of vacation days, because the idea
Oh yeah,
is that somebody else is always willing to do your job. So there's always somebody else who won't take that vacation day. So
you're replaceable.
yeah.
And it would do well for leaders, a good leader, the one that we're talking about, the platonic leader,
Hmm.
to let their employees know, don't worry, no, your job isn't replaceable. You are valuable. Please take care of. Dan knows my manager, and she's exactly that way. She's regularly saying, you are a diamond. Take care of that diamond. Buff that diamond. Go relax. Go take care of yourself. And so And what does she get in return for that? Dedicated people who love her.
Hmm.
They will die for her. They will go above. They'll work on a Sunday for her. That kind of, because she asks us not to work on Sundays. It's pretty powerful.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, you can always tell by somebody who has high turnover rates what kind of shop they're running, right? Or what kind of team they're running versus people who have like long-term retention rates. It's a definite signal.
Hmm.
So what is character? I know Aristotle talks about it, and you're an Aristotle fan. So what does Aristotle have to say about character?
And how does it apply to organizations and leadership?
To organizations. Yeah, it's character is it's that activity of the mind or of the soul. I like the word character just in case, because today when we think about soul, it has such a religious and spiritual connotation. But for Aristotle,
Right.
that's not. It just meant the non-physical part of yourself, your mind, that stream of consciousness. And that's what character is. And to this day, even if somebody doesn't think there's such a thing as a soul, they would still say that the character is of more value than, one's physical self. So the
Yeah.
character is where all of those traits that make you you reside. If you are witty, if you care about justice, if you're courageous, those don't occupy the physical self. If let's just say, if when I die I donate my body to science and medical students, they'd be able to say a lot about me through my physical self. They could say, oh, she's of Eastern European descent, she's this height, she is female, had a baby. But they wouldn't be able to say, wow, she was so charming. They wouldn't be able to say anything like that. So your
Right.
character is actually the most important thing about you that requires development, contemplation, choices, self-awareness, all of these things. Now, and that is what makes you good. Now, sometimes people have thought about this kind of theory that's really called virtue theory, of this development of the character. That what's the distinction between that and egoism, like something that Ayn Rand would have put out. And the thing is that when it comes to character development, especially the moral virtues, developing that, like justice and courage, honor, or truth telling, you notice that all of those character traits, those positive character traits, actually imply others. You can't be a truth teller or honest alone. You can't just like be in the shower alone and be
Right.
like, I did it. You can't be
I'm going to
alone.
tell the truth to myself.
And
I
being
do that all the time. I lather my hair and I like talk about the truth.
and then yeah, and then with courage, that implies another. With justice, it implies another. So it's not the same thing as an egoistic type theory. So character development is really where you are flourishing, but it requires a recognition and a practice. It's a self it's an activity of the self, development of the self. Image, on the other hand, is a projection of what you want other people to see, and it's one dimensional. And so the image, so when you want to say like, like this, work on your image or your brand, people are talking in terms of brand. It is just
I know
one
we're all
dimensional.
branded now.
Yeah. It's just what you want for other people to see of you. So it's not your full self. And we are making the image so much more important, which means that we are making what other people think of us our priority, as opposed to development on what it is that we really want. And so character and image, they're being swapped as though they're interchangeable, and they're not. Character development is a self-sufficient type of happiness. It does not require anything else. Like, for instance, I love reading. I am a bookworm. I like mysteries, I like history, I like philosophy, I like just essays. And when I read them, no one else is involved, and I can honestly say that I'm happy when it's good. um, it just makes me happy, and that's completely different from image. I guess I could post a photo of myself with a book and be like, this is my image, but it
Right.
doesn't. But then it's like, because I want everybody else to know that I like the book, but that's not required for me to enjoy the book or happiness. So I think that that is one of the things that we're pushing on younger generations with social media, is that you have to have this polished social media profile, which means that you are only showing one part of yourself. And it's disingenuous, and it can make one feel very empty, especially for young women. I don't know as much about men. I just think about young women using all of these different features in order to change their photo so it's just perfect to get just the right amount of likes for somebody else, and then that is your image, that is your brand, and that is exhausting. That's a lot of energy. That's exhausting.
What's the effect of conflation of image and character, let's say in the workplace? Um, Me kind of working at a company or a job. What's the dangers of me conflating those two?
I think if it was to an excess, which I think happens to younger generations, and I think it happens to girls in particular, it will be paralyzing because you will just be consumed with worry about what other people think of you. And the reason why I
Hmm.
say it with girls is maybe it's because I can relate to it. I mean, as a young girl, and even as a young adult, and then now as a full grown Gen X woman, um, that pressure about appearance has always been there. That's not something that's new. I was, telling my students the other day, we were talking about how this is in Philosophy of Sex and Love, about how sexuality comes through even in the genre of the mystery genre and detective genre. And I talked a little bit about Charlie's Angels and how exciting Charlie's
Oh
Angels
yeah.
was, because it was like in the 70s where you had this movement forward, the actualization of women being able to have their own accounts and divorced or they could get schools, they could have jobs, they could do so much more because the laws were permitting it. You had Title IX, you had female athletes, but
Yeah.
Charlie's Angels was like this movement forward. But the big but in that is that you have to be skinny and beautiful, and the man is still your boss.
Hmm.
So there were all of these things that were like
Actually,
you
his
could
name
be
was
empowered.
Bosley. His name was Bosley.
No,
Wait,
actually, it was
Charlie.
Charlie.
Wait, Bosley's
No,
Charlie.
from.
wasn't it Bosley? Wasn't Bosley like their
He was the
handler guy?
Oh
intermediary.
yeah, yeah.
No, he was the handler, but
That's
the
right.
Yes,
boss was
Oh, that's
Charlie.
I know,
right.
but his name was Bosley. Is what I'm saying. The
That's right.
handler's name was a boss.
But there was this, like, from what I grew up with, or like even with Wonder Woman, like you've got all these very exciting female roles who are really empowering, but you still have to be pretty and thin. And the the thing is that I understand what that obsession is like. What social media has done is that it has just magnified it. It hasn't created something new. So the idea of a young girl caring what other people think, and is she pretty enough, and does she have the right size body and the right makeup and all this, that's not new. It's just that it's magnified because, like, let's just put it this way, like at the end of the day, like at work for instance, like I can make myself appear nice and do all that, and then I can get home, let's say before social media, and then I can just like put on the sweats and like watch TV. I can be myself. But if you just pick up the phone after work and you're scrolling, you are still very much conscious of the image and what people think of it. Your day is not done. It's flooding you.
So it can
Yeah.
be soul crushing to some degree if you don't disconnect the two from each other. Um, okay, yeah, makes sense.
Or if we don't encourage the full development of a person, getting back to character, how do we encourage people to be developing their character and not just cultivating a brand or an image, right? Because again, that image is superficial and one dimensional, and we want to make sure that the people we're developing are fully actualized in multiple dimensions.
Well, people get excited about fame and about likes. And I'm not anti popularity or fame
Yeah,
or money. I'm not anti any of that. It's just that that is the byproduct of the character development. That's not in lieu of it. So, like, let's just say
right.
Right.
somebody who,
Yeah.
I mean, somebody like Steve Jobs, right? Like that, the wealth and the fame and the myth and everything, that is as the result of the hard work that he put in. Or, I mean, yeah, it's the byproduct. It's not the goal, but we have somehow made it that the fame and the money and the Instagram likes and the followers is the goal instead of the byproduct of having put your heart and soul into developing something amazing.
Yeah, we like to talk about
Yeah.
sense and signals, right? And so basically, the image is a signal. It's a signal, and
Hmm.
it can be conflated for what that signal's coming from. But in what you're saying, it's not necessarily the truth. And so to judge something based on a signal is going to be folly.
Hmm.
So one, because I know one of your expertise. I know we're coming to the toward the end. We're barreling toward the end, but I can't, since you have your expertise is in philosophy and technology and places. I can't not ask you about Chat GPT 3 and now recently 4,
Hmm.
right? And we were talking earlier in the episode at the beginning about meaning making and happiness and the act of writing. I believe that we were talking about like the act of creation and the joy one gets out of like writing a sentence, or a story or something. um ChatGPT kind of threatens that. At least when I first encountered it and started playing with it, I felt a sense of depression. Not depression, but I felt a sadness because I feel like that technology has the potential to take something away from the phenomenological experience of being a human being,
Hmm.
right? Because it can produce the written word and stories and text. I realize now that maybe that was a premature reaction because it's not very sophisticated, but at the
Not
same
yet.
time, not yet. And that's what I'm getting to. It yet, I could see the potential of it happening. And I was talking to a student a couple days ago who was saying, "Oh well, I'm looking forward to Chat GPT 4. I've already subscribed to it, and I'm going to get it to write all these ghost articles for me and stuff like that for his website." And so, and I felt that, kind of deflating too. What do you see the impact of a technology like ChatGPT on meaning making and happiness for human beings?
Yeah.
And is ChatGPT really the first stages of our first replicant?
Our
That's
first
really what I'm curious
replicant.
as.
I think when it comes to technology, I think this is also where I think philosophy is helpful, is what is uniquely human, and we want to keep that. I think that if it takes the place from assisting to then replacing things that are uniquely human, then we definitely need to be aware of it. And Nicholas Carr wrote an article called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" And he was
Hmm.
tapping into this in 2008. And
Yep.
the
The
I
Shallows, right? The
yes,
Shallows was his
yes.
book.
And that was, let me put it this way. We do need to be wary. So there's plenty of technology that has tried to do things for us that are uniquely human, and the thing is, it just doesn't pan out. So for example, the vehicle can get me from point A to point B, but that doesn't mean that I can stop moving. It can't actually exercise for me, and exercise is essential for me to be able to exist, and also to be able to think and to clear my mind, to go out on walks. So even though that technology exists, not going to replace that. I think something else that has happened with this is with Gen Z and millennials, actually, the impact of dating apps, and this idea of bringing a
Mm.
technology to do all of the work for you, and it is not working. People are meeting each other and hooking up, but it turns out we're actually in a sex recession. So for your listeners, if they don't know that, congratulations. But apparently we're in a sex recession. It's an article that Kate Julian wrote that was also in the Atlantic, that because people are relying on their phones so much, that it is replacing that vulnerability and that connection, talking to actual people. So whenever we try to have, and then as a result of that, intimacy has fallen by the wayside because people are just not interested, or it's so few and far between for people, that the hookup culture is not really satisfying, and then nobody just really feels like doing it again. And so it's like, you've got this problem with any time we want technology to replace things that are uniquely human. So with the writing process, I kind of am in the same camp of these other things, where writing is a joy and a struggle for me, but it is partly what makes
Hmm.
me me, and nothing can actually do that for me. If I have something else do it for me, I'm losing out part on what it means for me to be me. And the same way, nobody can read a book for me. Like, there's just some things that nobody can exercise for me. Nobody can have a friendship for me or an intimate relationship for me. And nobody can write for me. Nobody can read for me. So there are some things that technology just can't replace. And if we ever pretend like it doesn't work. Like the dating app stuff ends up being just kind of a mess. The the exercise, like we're trying to say we've got all these machines that can do this. It turns out you still personally have to do the exercise. It doesn't matter whatever kind of machine you buy. It doesn't matter whatever kind of diet you try. Like you still have to do all
You
of
haven't
the work.
seen that? What is it? That technology where you connect electrodes to your muscles as you sleep, and then it twitches them while you're sleeping, and you're getting a
There is
workout
something
while
like
you're
that.
while you're in your circadian rhythms. No, it was all the rage 10 years ago.
Shaking
That's
like that.
why I'm buff right now. Is because so,
You
so
should
let
see
me.
his abs.
Oh yeah, you don't want to. You don't. No one wants to see that.
I do want to say one thing.
No,
I'm
let
going to
me finish
interrupt
this.
you. I want
Wait,
to
I want
interrupt
to.
you. No, 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 no,
No,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no.
no. You've interrupted me like multiple times.
Hold
Give me
on,
this one.
hold on.
I
Hold
want
on.
to tie it back.
Hold
I
on.
want to tie it
You're
back.
like
I do
British
No,
too, but
Parliament right now.
I have a question. I have a
I know it's the
I have a
British
question.
Parliament.
I have a
So I
question
want to
to
tie
ask
this back to
her.
character.
I
I
know,
don't.
but you don't want to leave character. I'm not leaving character. I wanted to ask her a question. All right, go, you child, hit
All right. I just want to. It sounds like, based on what
it.
you're saying, is that all roads lead back to character because a lot of what you just talked about in terms of Chat GPT and these technologies that replace what you do as a human being, they can't replace your character, and your character is your own internal experience, right? Kind of like the soul, for lack of a better word. And so we need the character to have the discipline to exercise and to feel that phenomenological experience of the endorphins rushing from writing a good poem or something like that. So I just wanted to make that point. It's the connection there
Yeah,
to
like a
character.
dishwasher is not going to, so a machine doing my dishes is not going to interrupt my human experience at all or make me less of a human or interrupt my character at all. But it's something like, not having a conversation with a friend, that would interrupt the quality of my
Right.
life. If I were to just give that over to texting or to liking their stuff on social media, that would be an interruption of me living well and enjoying my life. And you're right. Like, I think for me, everything does come back to this question of what does it mean to live well? And that's something that Rudy and I work on with Good is in the Details. This idea of we teach people so many different skills and crafts and ideas, but it doesn't mean anything if we can't talk about what does it mean to enjoy your life. What does it mean to live life
Right.
well? And I think that there's a very broad answer to that, to give space for everybody to enjoy their life, but there's also a border there. There is a border there of things that will not, if you cut out some of these things that are uniquely human, you are not going to enjoy your life. And so that's why I think, despite the conversation, wherever the trajectory, I do come back to this notion of character and development of that as a way for you to enjoy your life. And I do want to add one thing, because I sometimes get a little concerned about this, because Aristotle by contemporary thinkers has been criticized. If you take him, take all of it, is that it was a bit elitist and that it could elbow out people from. I want to say that in my understanding and the way in which I have really enjoyed this notion of character development and virtue theory from Aristotle, that I don't want to exclude a population of people who are born with disabilities, because I still
Right.
think that in that realm of existence, it does not of less value because somebody can't, contemplate justice or something like that, but that just the laughter and the play, things that are uniquely human,
Hmm.
and the love that can be from family and relationships, that is still far more valuable than any material thing.
Yeah, and all that actually kind of leads into the thought I had, and which is, and it's sort of a question and also sort of a platonic experiment in
Mhm.
my head, and that is, you were talking about writing, and even what you just said just now, I think kind of falls into this question slash statement, and it sounds like what we're saying is what it is to be human and to derive your character and your happiness, or to maximize your character and then be happy, is to not be comparing it against the technologies that are supposedly challenging it. And the thought I thought about was perhaps there could be a Chat GPT thing that technically writes more interesting stories that the world wants to read than stories I write. But I should be writing for myself
Mhm.
first. And that doesn't matter that I'm not selling, and that Chat GPT has been able to game the exact sentences that people enjoy reading for whatever reason. Okay, that's a different subject. I shouldn't be comparing myself. I'm doing it. I'm deriving all my actions and my sense of well-being and happiness from what makes me happy. Now, if my happiness is to compete against ChatGPT, that's a different subject. But anyways, what say you on that? What are your thoughts on what I just said? Did I just
Yeah.
repeat what everybody just said just 5 minutes ago?
No, you're spot on. It's that would be like an exercise of the mind. I mean, for me, just that challenge of, finding the right word, or see how I can play with this sentence, or evoke this emotion, or give more meaning, or describe the significance. That's me exercising my mental capacity, my flexing my mental muscles. And so that's really what the joy is. You're right. It's not for other people. If other people like what I write, that's good. That's great. But it's really about me enjoying my life. And that's one way. That's not for everybody. Some people,
No.
sometimes people,
Right.
there's jokes about like, why do I have to learn algebra? Because when am I ever going to use that, or something like that? It's about flexing the mental muscle. That's what it's about.
Right.
That's the
That
skill.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, Gwendolyn, this was a fascinating discussion. I think we've been on over an hour, recording for over an hour. That's how engaging it was. I hope
Thank
when you
you.
and Rudy do the good is in the details podcast, that you don't have any fights like Jodah and I
We try to keep it lively.
do.
Rudy's
we'll
always
have to
telling
do
me, he's
those
like,
excerpts.
Rudy's like, you said you philosophers never have any answers. Like, that's the thing. Cause he's a lawyer. So he's like always got answers for everything, or there is an answer for things. He doesn't want it to be complicated. And then, he says that I complicate everything, but that's partly what makes it fun. He has a fear of
That's
aliens
good.
too. He
Yeah,
has a
that
fear of
fiction.
death and a fear of aliens. And I'm like, I don't know. Aliens are not interested in us, and death happens. Like that's so we have these different
Yeah.
points of view about these things.
Interesting. Yeah. Well,
Have you heard of terror management theory?
No, no.
That could be a whole nother
I'll let
podcast.
him
Maybe that'll
know.
be our next one. Look up terror management theory.
it's not what
It's
you
a great
think,
one.
or maybe it is. I don't know. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been wonderful to have you on this podcast, and we'd love to have you on again at some point. And
Yeah.
folks, Gwendolyn, do you have any place that people can find you at, like a website or anything like that? And then we can
Or a
also talk really
podcast.
briefly about your podcast.
Oh yeah. So good is in the details, and then on Instagram we're at Good is in the Details Pod, and that's probably a good place
Oh,
to get us. If you want any of my philosophy TikToks, that's at Prof Dolske, PROFDOLSKE.
Dolske.
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thanks, Gwendolyn. This was again a fascinating conversation, and thank you for sharing your time
Fantastic.
with us. And
Yeah, it's so cool.
listen to Good is in the Details.
Good is in
Thank
the
you.
details. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. And hey, everybody, thanks for joining us as well. Leave your comments down below. Make sure that they're
Subscribe,
respectful.
like.
Subscribe, like, everything. So see y'all later.